Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Chris Jackson, and we're going to go through a mini case study of a real-world military reliability conundrum / atrocity when it comes to...
Well, that never happens. You know that.
Yes.
You found one. Amazing.
Oh, no, I didn't have to look too hard. But in this case, we're going to be talking about this thing called the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, or JLTV, which has been... which is now part of the US Department of Defense, the US DoD's fleet of armored vehicles, and it's actually used by a few militaries across the world as well. But I think this is a really good case study. Amongst other things, there is some information which has been released to the public, which we can obviously quote and talk about and interrogate, which is not always the case for military projects. But secondly, I think it really does bring a spotlight onto some of the many really stupid assumptions big, grey, bureaucratic corporate organisations tend to make about testing as their main philosophy for making reliability happen.
The topic, just in general, and it was a discussion with somebody just a couple of days ago, and they were in the Navy and rotating into an part of the organization that oversees contracts and delivery, and it's from the reliability aspect of it. Kind of reminded me what you were doing coming from Australia and then rotating back to a reliability team within the military. And I think it was related as much to procurement or to maintenance or both. I'm not sure. But they were like, I'm only here for a year. And I know that this is a frustrating problem, and we have, case studies. People are talking about us and laughing at us because we can't get this stuff right. But it's such a big problem. Why I can't solve it in a year.
Right.
And it says, what you can do is set the stage to start solving it. You can admire it, which is, I think, a lot of what Congress does, but it's like, what are you going to do to actually change it? And
right.
Somebody's got to start. So anyway, this discussion, I think, is lining up to something I had recent discussions about and frustrations, but this was the one I was talking about was in the Navy, which I don't think the Navy does joint light tactical vehicles. So
I think technically the Marine Corps has it, which is part of the Navy. But anyway, yeah. So, but you and I are ex-military, so we have been privy to some absolutely awful group decision-making approaches to trying to get equipment that, one, works for the soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and two, is worth the money we spend getting it. I mean, I don't think Western militaries have pulled those two unique combinations of those two unique metrics of success together for a long time. But anyway, maybe we should launch into the scenario I have at hand. I do have some quotes and some stuff from the actual documents which have been released, so there is no ambiguity. But to set the scene, the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, many of us have heard of the Humvee, which is sort of like a bigger, beefier, more Arnold Schwarzenegger version of a Jeep that sort of became the general service vehicle. And the Humvees were, for what they were designed to do, pretty good. But then, of course, when the adversaries that the troops using those Humvees were fighting became more adept at things like improvised explosive devices, then all of a sudden we need to strap armor to these Humvees. And armor, as a rule, is really, really heavy. And all of a sudden the Humvees are underpowered and all sorts of other issues when we tried to put this armored protection around a vehicle which is never designed to have that armored protection on it. So it's not a criticism of the Humvee, but essentially we had to move on. And that was essentially the genesis of this thing called the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, which is designed to be armored, to be sort of roughly comparable in size to the Humvee. It is bigger, but it's certainly not a Mack truck or a tank size. And it's going to have like I said, the armor, but lots of other things too, like inbuilt electrical generation capabilities and communication systems as part of how it rolled. And so the US DoD essentially released this idea for a new vehicle to the world, and a bunch of defense contractors came back with their attempts to design a vehicle that met the requirements or the vision. And there's quite a few that responded. And essentially, the one that got chosen was the vehicle designed by a company called Oshkosh. And while there is never, at least publicly, one single reason for a defense customer saying, I'm going to pick that one and not this one, in many ways, we're pretty comfortable that the issue that was for first and foremost in the decision maker's mind was reliability. So much so that when they did reliability demonstration testing, let's sort of laminate that phrase, demonstration testing, because we need to come back to it. The requirement was only met by one vehicle, and that was the Oshkosh JLTV. In fact, it turned out that it was having about 3 times fewer failures than what the requirement said was okay. So 3 times fewer is 3 times better. And it was actually having 5 times fewer failures than its nearest competitor. One of its competitors, I think Lockheed Martin, didn't get awarded the contract. They initiated a protest, and that didn't force, but the DoD decided to say, hey, the reason we went with Oshkosh is because they had demonstrated that they were experiencing 5 times less failures than your vehicle. Are there any questions? Lockheed Martin said, no, thank you very much. Protest withdrawn. So in a way, we have been able to peer into the decision-making process as to why the Oshkosh JLTV was chosen, because it was the most reliable. And then, of course, these were based off prototypes. And those prototypes were obviously based on the design. The design was clearly had the capacity to be robust. But after they started being manufactured and introduced into service, there was a problem. In fact, a lot of problems with reliability. And there was a report to Congress that essentially said, I've got the report in front of me right here, so I want to make sure that I get the wording correct. So they essentially said that all JLTVs are not operationally suitable because of deficiencies in reliability, maintainability, training, manuals, crew situational awareness, and safety. Now, a couple of those things deal with reliability. In fact, virtually all of them, apart from crew situational awareness. However, when you scratch the surface, that actually is based on the fact that some of these situational awareness systems were not working all the time. JLTVs demonstrated less reliability than its requirement. So just to set the scene, we had those prototypes demonstrate that they were experiencing 3 times fewer failures than the requirement. But once they started being manufactured and then issued to units and used by soldiers, turns out that these vehicles they were receiving were not meeting the requirements. The primary drivers of operational mission failures were engine wiring problems, flat and damaged tyres, brake system faults. There was also they also said crew had slow egress from JLTVs because of numerous reliability failures of doors not opening, etc., etc., etc. There's lots of other commentary at things like units cannot maintain the JLTV without support from the contractor due to vehicle complexity, ineffective training, poor manuals, and challenges with troubleshooting the vehicle. JLTV will require more maintenance than the Humvee based on the maintenance ratio demonstrated in a previous testing regime. The health monitoring system is not accurate and reduces crew and maintainer confidence in the system. I could go on, but hopefully you sense the key message. Now, what has happened really recently is that Oshkosh, who designed this vehicle, who has been manufacturing the vehicle, essentially the US DoD said, you know what? You're not going to manufacture this anymore. We're going to take the design you came up with and we're going to get somebody else to manufacture these vehicles for you. That happened this year. And the company which is now manufacturing these JLTVs is a company called AM General. Bit of history is AM General designed its own JLTV that competed against the Oshkosh's JLTV to try and win the initial contract way back when. And the AM General vehicle was one of the many vehicles which the Oshkosh vehicle appeared to be much more reliable then. So it's funny how things work.
It's who you know in Congress sometimes.
Right.
But what was the idea of switching the manufacturing? Is it manufacturing related problems because reliability is often in the design feature of it, and it makes me question the validity or usefulness of the demonstration test. Or is it just the variability of not being good at manufacturing that's leading to the problems?
Well, we'll come back to that one too, because amongst other things, defense contractors tend to be political animals and PR animals more than anything else. And There's an article that's now in Forbes written by a person called Lauren Thompson, who is a senior contributor for all things aerospace and defense. And lo and behold, just so happens that Oshkosh contributes to the think tank, or whatever you call the whole group of people who work at Forbes for their work. So just so happens there's an article written essentially decrying why the hell would is it okay for the US DoD to stop asking Oshkosh to manufacture these vehicles and start asking AM General. One of the issues is that the article argues that Oshkosh has a warm production line, an established supply chain, experienced workforce, relevant intellectual property, and a moderate 7% operating margin. So clearly Oshkosh has been opening the books a little bit to help the author of this article. But in the article it also says, given its track record for reliability and price discipline, Oshkosh, which is in the article, and I quote, a contributor to my think tank may have a point. A question I'd ask you is what track record for reliability? But anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, so it's all sunk cost, you're not meeting the requirements there. We're going to find a different solution.
Right. And so, I mean, we don't actually know why Defense US DoD changed. We can have a pretty good guess though. And one of the many things that I think defense and bureaucracies get focused too much on is this idea of demonstration testing. I am staggered by the amount of pseudo formalism that goes into demonstration testing. It can't be this, you can't touch that. It has to be operational circumstances. The test mission profile needs to be specified to the second. And yet we have a clear example of something which demonstrated reliability. You can't see my air quotation marks.
Yeah.
Where it's 3 times more reliable than the requirement. But then when they start providing these 20,000 vehicles to the units, it's not meeting the requirements.
And there's not, I mean, in this case, they lost the manufacturing part of it. I wonder if they also lose the logistics support, if they're not selling components or doing the depot repair levels type stuff, because that would hurt them. Then that's a whole profit stream that comes out of these contracts also often that goes away. I'm just speechless because I've seen it too many times where a company designs something, allegedly meets the requirements, but as soon as you add a handful of dust to it, or you give it to a soldier that, I did it myself. We had these radio mounts those are some robust connectors that you slam this thing into. It was like a 25-pound radio box. And first thing you did is you pull it out of the socket and slam it back in. And a lot of times that got it working again.
Yep.
Until you just slammed it one too many times and you just shattered the connectors. And then you couldn't put any radio in it. And it was a problem. But, the stuff I got to deal with was so robust, and there wasn't the pace of innovation and all of the, situational awareness. And when you first said that, I said, they had windows on this vehicle. Is that what you mean? No, it is some exotic sensor array and algorithms and computers and all that other crap that does, like a local radar basically, or whatever they're using. But it's like, yeah, we're asking a lot in these military systems, and they are complex. There's no doubt about it. But the demonstration test is, I agree with you. It's like showing up, to a stock car race with an Indy car, and it's so finely tuned, but it'll only work for the 100 laps. That's it. It'll go really, really fast, but you're not going to bring that vehicle back next week without overhauling it. Whereas, they know it's a big deal. They have to get it right. There's immense pressure to hand build the demo units and make them work. And it's like, oh my God.
So I'll just summarize your sort of thoughts. One is where the operational conditions vary from test conditions, which means that this alleged demonstration test demonstrates nothing.
Right.
And again, this is conjecture here. If I'd have a guess, actually, I think that demonstration tests for military vehicles tend to be pretty robust, because you can, it's just hours of driving over different terrain and different serials. But that's my experience kicking into my opinion. But that said,
but the vendors will not agree to go do some, let's put a company worth of these vehicles together and send them to one of our training facilities where you simulate battle conditions. Teams go out and shoot at each other with light, and sensors pick up hits and stuff like that, and then see how they do under simulated, as close as you can get to real conditions. I'm thinking there's a big facility in Southern California that does this stuff. They have these battalion on battalion type maneuvers. And they can really shake stuff out pretty darn quick.
Right.
It's not a prescribed, we're going to have 15 feet of mud with this viscosity and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, come on, give it to real soldiers. Let them go do what soldiers do. Right.
So there you go. So summarize that issues is the test conditions differ from operational conditions,
yep.
And it's often hard to simulate soldier conditions. But anyway, so that's number one.
Yep.
But number two in this case, I think this is my favorite one, is that the test vehicles are not the same as the actual vehicles.
It's not even a representative sample either. It's ludicrous to think that those are representative.
Right. And I think why are people saying that? Well, the design's good and everything else, but I have seen, I would say virtually every defence acquisition project focuses almost exclusively on demonstrating a design based on prototypes, and then everyone pays lip service to manufacturing. There's no point designing an amazing vehicle, which it appears as if this design was pretty amazing because it was able to achieve that level of reliability during demonstration testing. And I understand, notwithstanding those things, it was, let's just, in terms of comparison to the market, 5 times better than the next one.
Yep.
I would hazard a guess that this, in part, comes down to manufacturing. You get awarded the contract, and the customer's as much at fault as anybody else here, because it's the customer, the defence machinery, that essentially every single document you see about reliability for defence acquisition projects come down to passing a demonstration test, which happens before you start manufacturing these things.
Yep.
And so no one is culturally inclined to think about manufacturing. It'll just happen. Mass production will quality control our way out of any problem. And so
we'll just make enough so you have spares.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is just a really big eye opener for, hey, there's no point designing something that's amazingly reliable if you're going to lose it all by manufacturing substandard junk. Yep. I'll go back to this issue that our man in Forbes wrote, saying, well, Oshkosh has a modest operating margin of 7%. Yeah, that's based on how much it costs for them to manufacture these vehicles. Doesn't mean competitors are all going to be paying the same, will be spending the same amount of money, because as you and I both know, some of the higher quality manufacturers are actually tend to be the cheaper ones because they don't have to fight fires every 5 minutes on the production line.
Yep.
So it's just a big eye opener, I would argue, for people who are involved in this space. This is, for me, symptomatic of virtually every defence project I've been involved in. It's we try and force something over the finish line with demonstration testing, then everyone forgets about reliability, and then quite literally the wheels start falling off when soldiers try and use these things for the first time. And it's because, at least in this industry, I'd argue that they just don't even know what manufacturing is. They assume, well, the specification says these need to be within this tolerance, so if it's not, then we can sue people. No, that's not how it works.
No. Well, I mean, it's not limited to the military industry. It's the auto industry is struggled through this through years. You know, they get this cool. I mean, I got in a convertible Mustang, and it had 3 miles on it. It was brand new, and it was a rental car, and the door wouldn't close. I opened the door and sat in the vehicle, and I am not, 800 pounds. My frame at that time, and even now, should not bend the chassis so that the door doesn't fit anymore. I was like, what in the world? It's one of the very few cars I got in and immediately got back out and said, I don't want this car. And he says, wow, you're the third person of the day that didn't want this car.
It's just, I don't know. What else am I missing, though, with this? Or I covered the two main.
Well, I mean, part of it is the contracting part. And I agree with you, is the government and the way they go about doing these contracts is fraught with lots of problems, not just reliability related issues or manufacturing related issues. And it's not, and I don't think the issue is all that unique just to the military. It's just that they do it rather poorly over and over again. But it's one of those things. And I spent a good part of my time when I was at HP, working with vendors to make sure that they could manufacture it. We would assess organizations for their capability to manufacture our products. And I mean, we ran very specifically designed test boards that we would then disassemble and do really detailed metallurgy, I don't know what, analysis of the solder joints to make sure that it was formed properly at the molecular level, at very basic level. And they looked at us like we were nuts, that we were asking all these questions, and we didn't just walk down the line and then go get lunch and say, all right, everything's good. No, we spent a week there, and we ran tests, and we ran, boards and did detailed analysis. And that information was often the deciding factor. No, we're not doing business with you because you do this, this, and this, and this wrong.
Right. When you look at, the JLTV it's a technological step forward, and then often people say, well, it's a new technology, so therefore expect issues and problems.
Yeah.
But when you read the
braking system doesn't work. Come on.
we have been doing braking systems for bigger vehicles than JLTVs for over 100 years.
Yep.
If you can't get that right, that's your issue. We're talking about doors not working. We're talking about engine wiring problems, flat and damaged tires. Now, just to be clear, when we say flat and damaged tires, most people will think, well, okay, if a tire is flat on my car, it usually means that I've driven over something sharp. Is that really the vehicle's fault? Well, these tires for these sort of vehicles are actually mini machines in their own right. They often have what's called CTIS, centralized tire inflation systems, because they need to be
not flat.
They need to have right, but also need to have their pressure dropped for certain terrain and increased for others. Mm-hmm. And so the tires aren't just tires. They're not things you can buy from
the tire shop down the road.
No. They're quite complex. But by the same token, we have been doing this in mining industries and military industries for decades. So we're not talking about Zulu rays or some weird sort of technological phenomenon which has just reared its ugly head for this brand new spaceship of a vehicle. No, we're talking about drivers of failure being well-known issues that should never be allowed to happen. Engine wiring problems are either design issues or manufacturing issues.
Yep.
We could probably keep going on that. But the doors having reliability failures, as they call it in this report, let's just call it failures. How long has humankind been designing and manufacturing doors for, Fred? I know these are heavy doors.
Well, they should have called Carl, because I think he got his start testing doors for GM. Too. I think it was. Had a machine that slammed doors in different ways.
Right. Yeah, it's just really, really interesting. There's also some other things here where they appear to be, there's a complaint about visibility due to blind spots around the vehicle. That's a design issue. So you accept the design as is, customer. So Why are you complaining about that now? So it's just a weird rant of it's hard to look at this seriously from an engineering perspective, but this is unfortunately the language that most defence customers tend to use, and they don't understand. They can't even use the words that they need to understand to get it right.
Well, one of my closest interaction to this bureaucracy, other than being in the military, was the Missile Command. They had a request to one of their prime suppliers to create a document that reflected, well, how do they do it in industry? How do people like HP folks, or GM, how do they go about designing and building products that, actually work more often than not? And whereas we're just struggling with every program one after another, without getting into all these details, that it came to me as a contract to write a life cycle document, basically, for how do you go about designing and, a reliable product. And it was really the charter. What the folks from the Missile Command wanted was, what's the secret that you guys do that makes it work? And I said, well, here's my experience. Here's the basic product life cycle and the types of activities at different points and the checks and balances. And, you design it in and blah, blah, blah. And it was, I don't know, it's supposed to be like a 20-page document of just, this is different. This is the way we do it. And you can adopt chunks of that into your own system. If I'm designing a computer or I'm designing a missile guidance system, which is a computer with sensors, they're not that different, right? And it might have different requirements and stresses and all the other happy stuff that go with it, but it's a product. You can design this in such a way that you can manufacture it and it works. And it never got implemented or adopted because the prime contractors didn't see enough loopholes for them to get through whatever the hell they wanted to get through.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, you guys are crazy.
Right. And going back to the Forbes, the Forbes article is just, obviously it's not being paid for, but you can see there's some
favorable press. Yeah, favorable press. Yeah.
It's amazing how they knew about the 7% operating margin, but there's also other things like it says that Oshkosh should have been the low bidder because they're the ones who know how to do this, and therefore, if they didn't go with Oshkosh again, it's because someone else bid lower price. Therefore, that's an unrealistic bid. Oshkosh has a better credit rating. Oshkosh has this. AM General was private equity owner. Blah, 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 blah. And you go, not one of these criticisms or complaints or rants deal with engineering or building stuff.
Yeah. It's
all about the stuff that looks good on a glossy brochure for someone who's trying to convince a politician to go this way instead of that way. I think that's part of the root cause as well.
Well, yeah. No, there's the prime contractors that serve they have massive buildings in the loop around DC. And they're major contributors to campaigns and, lobbying and all that other stuff. So yeah, there's not that many soldiers that get to go lobby Congress. I just, it's frustrating. I don't have a good answer for the overall thing. And I understand the problem, and I think there are ways to go about solving it. It's going to take more than just one or two people to do it. So it's time to start a major campaign to fix this thing. But, if you're listening to this, it may sound familiar in your industry. If you're building an aircraft and you get the demo right, and then, some company buys 100 of them and find out you really don't know what you're doing. You may not want to, give us the details so we can talk about it on a podcast, but you may know of other similarities or other frustrations in other industries that are on par with this kind of thing. The hard part with the tactical vehicles case study is that it's a lot of tax money just kind of going down the hole. So that hurts just individually to people that are funding this stuff. But if you're listening to this and got a comment or a question or a thought on this, let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. And there's a couple of ways to get in touch with us there. Chris and I are available, as well as the other hosts of the show, via LinkedIn or our About pages on the site. So plenty of ways for you to join us on the show and get your ideas, questions, or opinions integrated into the next upcoming episodes. So that would be fantastic. All right. Absolutely. So we're not going to see these vehicles like Humvees become personal vehicles. Are they road safe at least?
I don't think they're going to be sold to the public the way Humvees are. I'm sure they're road safe, but I just don't think they're
not safe for anything around them.
No. Well, they are a different beast, suffice to say.
All right, cool. Well, I'm not going to go out and look for one. This sounds like I could find it, on the ditch someplace, stock, not working. But so it goes. I'm just frustrated. I'm more speechless than I should be on this one, but yeah, it's like whatever.
Taxpayers should be a bit frustrated.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks much, Chris. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Always a pleasure, Fred.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.